Listen carefully, not with the ears alone, but with the quiet space inside, where thoughts usually do not enter. In this world, everything pulls you outward. The noise is constant. Words, notifications, opinions, demands, comparisons, fears, each one asking for a piece of your attention. And slowly, without noticing, the mind becomes a crowded marketplace where nothing is still and nothing is clear. But there is a different way to live. Not away from life, but away from disturbance. Not by escaping the world, but by learning how to stand untouched in the middle of it. This is the blueprint of stillness. Stillness is not emptiness. It is not the absence of life. It is the presence of awareness without interruption. Like a deep lake that reflects the sky perfectly because it is not disturbed by wind. When the surface is calm, even the smallest light becomes visible. In the same way, when the mind becomes still, truth becomes visible. Most people believe peace is something to be found. They chase it in achievements, in relationships, in possessions, in recognition. But peace that depends on conditions is fragile. It rises and falls like waves. True stillness is not found outside, it is uncovered inside by removing what does not belong. The first design of this blueprint begins with awareness of noise. Not fighting it, not rejecting it, just seeing it. The mind is always producing thoughts like a river produces flow. You do not stop the river by force, you simply learn not to drown in it. When you observe your thoughts instead of becoming them, a space opens. In that space, you are no longer the noise. You are the one who notices it. Then comes the art of simplicity. A life overloaded with unnecessary desires becomes heavy. Every desire is a direction, and too many directions create confusion. Simplicity is not poverty, it is clarity. It is choosing only what matters and letting the rest fall away without struggle. When life becomes simple, the mind stops scattering itself in 1,000 places. There is also the discipline of silence. Not only silence of speech, but silence of reaction. Many disturbances are not caused by the world, but by our immediate response to it. Every insult does not require a reply. Every opinion does not require acceptance. Every thought does not require belief. In silence, power returns to its source. A person who can remain silent inwardly is no longer easily shaken. Stillness also requires presence. The mind often lives in the past or the future, rarely in the only place where life actually exists, this moment. When attention returns fully to now, even ordinary actions become complete. Walking is just walking. Breathing is just breathing. Eating is just eating. In that completeness, something extraordinary happens. Life becomes enough. The noise of the world thrives on distraction. It wants your attention fragmented so you remain reactive. But stillness is resistance without struggle. It is not rebellion. It is independence. When attention is no longer scattered, the world cannot easily control the inner state. There is a deeper layer to this blueprint. It is understanding that everything external is temporary. Praise fades, pain changes, success dissolves, failure transforms, nothing stays fixed. When this is seen clearly, attachment weakens naturally. And where attachment weakens, stillness grows. A person living in stillness does not become inactive. Action still happens, but it is no longer driven by anxiety. It becomes clean, precise, and calm. Decisions arise not from fear, but from clarity. Such a life does not rush, yet nothing essential is missed. You may notice that stillness is not something you create. It is something you allow. Like dust settling in a glass of water, the mind settles when it is not constantly disturbed. The less you interfere with your inner world, the more it organizes itself. The greatest misunderstanding is believing that noise is stronger than silence. It is not. Noise depends on attention. Silence does not. Remove attention from noise, and it weakens. Return attention to awareness, and silence strengthens. In time, you begin to see that stillness is not a state you enter occasionally, but your natural condition when nothing is pulling you away from it. It is always there, beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath identity. To design a life away from noise is not to reject the world. It is to meet the world without being consumed by it. It is to stand like a mountain while winds pass over it. The mountain does not resist the wind, nor does it chase it. It simply remains. And in that remaining, something profound is revealed. You were never the noise. You were always the space in which the noise appeared. That is the blueprint. And once it is understood, life no longer needs to be escaped. It only needs to be seen clearly, lived gently, and held in quiet awareness. Stillness is inner awareness, not outer silence. True stillness is not the absence of life or sound, but the ability to remain aware and undisturbed while everything is happening around you. Stillness is often misunderstood as something distant or separate from daily life, but in truth, it is the most natural state of being. It is not created by force or achieved through struggle. It appears when attention is no longer constantly pulled outward by every sound, thought, or demand. In this state, awareness becomes steady, and life is seen more clearly without distortion. The mind usually behaves like a restless river, always moving from one thought to another. But beneath that movement there is a quiet depth that never changes. When a person learns to rest in that depth instead of following every surface wave, a profound shift begins to take place. Much of human suffering comes from identification with mental activity. Thoughts arise, and instead of being observed, they are accepted as truth. Emotions appear, and instead of being felt and released, they are clung to or resisted. This constant engagement creates inner noise, and that noise becomes so familiar that silence feels unusual. Yet silence is not emptiness, it is clarity without interference. In silence, perception becomes sharp, and understanding arises without effort. A life shaped by stillness does not reject the world. It engages with it, but without being consumed by it. Actions continue, responsibilities are fulfilled, and conversations happen, yet there is a background of calm awareness that remains untouched. This awareness does not react impulsively. It observes, understands, and then responds from a place of balance rather than confusion. As a result, even ordinary tasks begin to feel lighter and more meaningful because they are no longer driven by inner conflict. When desires become excessive, the mind loses its center. It begins to scatter itself across countless directions, always chasing something just out of reach. Stillness teaches a different approach: to simplify, to slow down internally, and to recognize what truly matters. As unnecessary mental weight is released, clarity naturally increases. In this clarity, even small moments of life carry depth and presence. Over time, it becomes clear that stillness was never missing. It was simply overlooked beneath layers of distraction and identification. When those layers are gently observed and loosened, what remains is a quiet, steady awareness that does not depend on circumstances. In that awareness, life is not only lived but deeply understood, and the noise of the world no longer defines the state of the heart. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of them. Peace begins when you stop identifying with every thought and instead recognize them as passing events in the mind. Silence of reaction is one of the deepest aspects of inner stillness, yet it is often the most difficult to understand in daily life. The world continuously provokes responses. Words are spoken that may be sharp. Situations arise that feel unfair, and events unfold that disturb comfort. In such moments, the usual habit of the mind is immediate reaction. It speaks back, defends itself, judges others, or creates stories to justify its position. This instant reaction seems natural, but it is also the source of unnecessary disturbance. When every situation is met with impulse, the mind never settles. It keeps burning in its own responses. To develop silence of reaction does not mean to become passive or indifferent. It means to create a small space between what happens and how you respond to it. In that space lies freedom. Without that space, life controls the mind. With that space, awareness regains its strength. A word is heard, but instead of reacting instantly, it is observed. A feeling arises. But instead of being carried away, it is seen clearly. In that moment of observation, the intensity of disturbance naturally weakens. This practice gradually changes the inner structure of experience. Situations that once created anger begin to lose their grip. Criticism no longer pierces as deeply. Praise no longer inflates the ego. The mind becomes less dependent on external triggers for its stability. It learns to remain centered even when the surface of life becomes unstable. This is not suppression, but understanding. Reaction is not stopped by force. It dissolves when awareness becomes strong enough to see its unnecessary nature. As silence of reaction deepens, communication also transforms. Words are no longer spoken just to win arguments or prove a point. They begin to arise from clarity rather than impulse. Listening becomes more genuine because there is no constant inner noise interfering with understanding. Relationships also shift because there is less emotional turbulence being projected outward. What remains is a calmer, more thoughtful interaction with life. Eventually, it becomes clear that most suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by uncontrolled reactions to those events. When reaction slows down, suffering also reduces. The mind discovers that it does not need to respond to everything immediately. In this discovery, a quiet strength emerges. It is a strength that does not shout, does not resist unnecessarily, but remains steady. And in that steadiness, life is experienced with far greater balance and ease. Simplicity reduces mental noise. A life filled with unnecessary desires and distractions creates confusion. Simplicity brings clarity, focus, and inner calm. Simplicity reduces mental noise because it removes the unnecessary weight that the mind carries without even noticing. The human mind has a natural tendency to collect ideas, desires, plans, worries, comparisons, and endless expectations. Each added layer may seem small on its own, but together they create a constant background pressure. This pressure does not always appear as obvious stress. Sometimes it shows up as restlessness, dissatisfaction, or the feeling that something is always missing even when nothing is wrong. Simplicity works like a gentle clearing process, not by forcefully rejecting life, but by removing what is not essential so that what remains can be seen clearly. When life becomes overly complicated, attention is divided into too many directions. Doubt the future. Another replays the past, another evaluates present situations, and yet another creates imaginary outcomes. This fragmentation prevents deep focus and inner stability. Simplicity gathers this scattered attention and brings it back into a more unified state. In that unity, mental noise naturally decreases because there are fewer competing demands pulling awareness in different directions. Simplicity also changes the relationship with desire. Many desires arise not from genuine need, but from comparison and conditioning. The mind sees what others have, imagines what it lacks, and begins to chase endlessly. This chase creates movement without rest, and movement without rest becomes noise. When simplicity is embraced, desire is not blindly followed, it is observed. Through observation, unnecessary desires lose strength on their own, not through suppression, but through understanding their emptiness. What remains are only those needs that are truly aligned with a balanced life. A simple life does not mean a lack of activity or richness of experience. Rather, it means clarity in activity and depth in experience. Even ordinary actions become more meaningful because attention is not scattered. eating, walking, speaking, or working becomes more present because the mind is not overloaded with unrelated thoughts. In this presence, even small moments carry a sense of completeness that is often missed in a complicated lifestyle. Over time, simplicity becomes a form of inner discipline. It is not about depriving oneself, but about choosing consciously. Every choice to let go of unnecessary mental or material clutter strengthens clarity. As clarity grows, inner noise weakens, and when noise weakens, a natural stillness begins to emerge. This stillness is not added from outside, it is revealed when excess is removed. In this way, simplicity becomes not just a way of living, but a doorway into a quieter and more centered mind. Present moment is often spoken about, yet rarely fully understood in its depth. The mind has a strong tendency to escape the only place where life actually exists. It moves constantly into memories of what has already passed or projections of what may come. In doing so, it misses the richness of what is directly in front of it. This constant movement creates a subtle disconnection from reality. Even when life is happening, the mind is elsewhere, and this division becomes a quiet source of dissatisfaction. When attention is fully placed in the present moment, something remarkable happens. The weight of past regret and future anxiety begins to loosen. The mind is no longer carrying unnecessary psychological time. What remains is direct experience, simple, clear, and immediate. In this directness, even ordinary activities feel more alive. Breathing becomes more noticeable. Sounds become clearer, and actions become more intentional. Nothing changes in the outer world, yet the way it is experienced transforms completely. Being present does not require effort in the usual sense. It is not about forcing the mind to stop thinking, but about gently returning attention to what is actually happening. Thoughts may still arise, but they are no longer the center of experience. Instead, they become background movement while awareness stays rooted in the now. In this rootedness, the sense of urgency that often drives mental noise begins to fade. Much of human stress comes from living in imagined time. The mind anticipates problems that are not present, replays mistakes that are no longer real, and builds narratives that may never happen. Presence interrupts this pattern. It brings awareness back to what is real and observable. In that return, unnecessary tension begins to dissolve. The mind realizes that most of what it fears is not happening in this moment. As presence deepens, life begins to feel more continuous and less fragmented. Instead of rushing through experiences, there is a sense of being with them fully. Conversations become more meaningful because listening is complete. Work becomes more effective because attention is not divided. Even silence becomes rich because it is no longer filled with internal distraction. Over time, presence reveals a deeper truth. Life is always unfolding here, not elsewhere. The past exists only as memory, and the future only as imagination. Only the present is real and accessible. When this is clearly seen, attention naturally settles, and in that settling a quiet stability emerges that does not depend on external conditions. This stability is the essence of a calm and centered way of living. Stillness is your natural state beneath all noise. Calmness is not something created, but something uncovered when attachment, reaction, and distraction are reduced. Expend stillness as a natural state beneath all noise is not something that needs to be created, but something that is already present, waiting to be recognized. The surface of the mind is often filled with movement, thoughts, emotions, reactions, and interpretations, but beneath all of this activity lies a quiet awareness that does not move. This awareness is not affected by the changing content of experience. It remains steady whether life feels pleasant or difficult, whether the mind is active or quiet. Most people overlook it because attention is constantly drawn to the surface, where movement is most visible. When identification with thoughts and emotions is strong, it feels as if inner noise is who we are. Each thought seems important, each emotion seems defining, and each reaction feels necessary. In this state, stillness appears distant, almost unreachable. Yet, this is only a misunderstanding of attention. Stillness is not absent, it is simply not being noticed. It is like the sky that remains unchanged even when clouds constantly pass through it. The clouds do not disturb the sky, yet they can hide it from view. In the same way, mental activity does not disturb awareness, but it can obscure recognition of it. As attention begins to shift from constant involvement with thoughts to simple observation of them, something subtle changes. Thoughts lose their authority. They are still present, but they are no longer controlling experience. Emotions arise and fall, but they are no longer taken as absolute truth. This shift creates a widening space inside the mind. In that space, stillness becomes more noticeable. It was always there, but now it is no longer hidden. With continued observation, the mind gradually loses its habit of over-identification. It begins to rest more often in awareness itself rather than in its content. This resting is not forced. It happens naturally when unnecessary engagement reduces. As engagement reduces, inattention also decreases. What remains is a quiet presence that is not dependent on circumstances. It does not rise with success or fall with failure. It simply remains as it is. In daily life, this stillness does not remove action or expression. Instead, it changes their quality. Actions become more deliberate, speech becomes more thoughtful, and reactions become less impulsive. Life continues to move, but from a calmer foundation. There is less inner conflict, less resistance, and less fragmentation. Eventually, it becomes clear that stillness was never something to be achieved in the future. It is the background of every moment, already present before thought begins. Recognizing this brings a deep sense of ease. Nothing needs to be added, only understood. And in that understanding, the mind returns to its natural state, quiet, aware, and undisturbed beneath all passing noise.